It's hard to believe, but Michael Bay is actually returning to Transformers 8 years after his departure. But beyond that, the studio has as many as 5 franchise projects in development. In the next few minutes, we'll explore why the war between the Autobots and Decepticons has reignited with new vigor. And is it true that the entire original cast will return to the film? Settle in, because it's going to be interesting. Let's start with the most pressing news, which has made many people recall the year 2007, when Transformers was a massive success in theaters. Interest in the film was so high that by the second installment, the franchise began to gross nearly $1 billion or more for each new picture. The reason for this was its unprecedented scale, scope, and a gigantic amount of high-quality graphics. Today, the first trilogy is rightfully considered the best time for the franchise, when the Autobots were thriving and at their peak. It is reported that Michael Bay personally initiated the development of a new film in the Transformers universe. And this is very telling, as it was this very director who turned a story based on a Hasbro toy line into a term synonymous with blockbuster. In total, he directed 5 films that brought in more than $4 billion. As paradoxical as it may sound, the last of them was The Last Knight, which received scathing reviews from critics and saw a nearly 50% drop in box office earnings. Consequently, the director was asked to step aside for someone else, remaining with the franchise only as a producer. Of course, Bay's official return to the director's chair has not yet been confirmed. The source emphasizes that he will be deeply involved in the project and will most likely be handling its production himself. Even during the promotional tour for the film Ambulant, Bay mentioned that Transformers is one of the best projects of his entire career. The director revealed that he was asked to stop after the 3rd film, and this request came from none other than Steven Spielberg. It was Spielberg who initiated the invitation for Bay to bring Transformers to the big screen. At first, Michael even refused several times because he couldn't imagine a film based on children's toys. But in the end, one of the most famous and profitable franchises in history was born, and Bay perfectly showcased his greatest strengths in it. Therefore, insiders report that it was the director who was looking for a way back into the franchise, not the studio persuading him to return. Although Paramount found itself backed into a corner, all the recent films about the war between the Autobots and Decepticons were drawing fewer and fewer viewers to theaters, and the screenwriters were increasingly tangling the timeline. Bumblebee and Rise of the Beast became something between prequels and a reboot, but they too failed to fix the situation. Last year's animated project, Transformers 1, while being quite high quality, failed to meet expectations at the box office. Moreover, Paramount's rights to the franchise expire in 2029. So the studio is determined to get the maximum benefit from it. To do this, they have launched 5 projects within this universe into development. One of them is supposed to be Michael Bay's new film. At the moment, it is known that Jordan Van Dina, whose most famous project is the comedy The Binge, is working on the script. A controversial choice, but he is a young screenwriter and apparently was able to propose an interesting idea. As for the return of the original actors, namely Shia LaBeouf and Megan Fox, the chances here are extremely slim. And it's not because both actors have aged considerably. LaBeouf has long been known on the internet for his unpredictable behavior, which could spiral out of control at any moment and harm the film. And Fox had a public falling out with Bay after the 2nd installment, which led to her being replaced in the 3rd film. Therefore, a triumphant reunion is likely not in the cards. However, the news of Bay's return is still encouraging because it was under his direction that the franchise thrived. Currently, there is no information on what stage of development the director's new film is in, but the scale, by all accounts, is planned to be unprecedented. The fact is that early concepts for a 6th numbered installment have long been discussed online. The main villain was supposed to be Unicron, representing a universal threat unlike any seen before. He was originally supposed to be the antagonist of Michael Bay's 3rd film, but the plot was already overloaded without him. So he was postponed until Age of Extinction, and he featured in the script for a long time. However, his appearance only took place in the 5th film, because it was his horns that were seen emerging from the Earth's core as the heroes fought Quintessa. A direct confrontation with him never happened. But in the cancelled 6th numbered Transformers film, Unicron was the main villain. Bay was going to push the scale to its limit and give the 2nd trilogy an epic conclusion. But as we know, that didn't happen, and the studio shifted its focus to prequel. Apparently, the director will finally be allowed to finish what he started, and we will see a Bay blockbuster taken to its absolute extreme. As for the other projects, the situation is also quite interesting. It is known that a crossover with the Soldiers of G.I. Joe is in development. I've already talked about this in detail in one of my videos, so we'll just recall the main points. The idea of a joint project has been discussed online for a long time because both franchises belong to Hasbro, and their film adaptations have their own audiences. The crossover was supposed to happen in the third installment of G.I. Joe. However, the sequel failed to attract a large audience, and these plans were postponed until Rise of the Beasts. It was in this film that we were shown that both universes exist together, and we even saw a joint battle scene in the finale. The events of the crossover will most likely also take place in the 90s and will be a direct continuation of Rise of the Beasts, with Noah Diaz remaining as the main character. Thus, the studio will continue the prequel series to bring it to a logical conclusion. It is also known that the director of the crossover will be Steven Caple. He was the one who directed Rise of the Beasts and was supposed to be responsible for the sequel jointly with the Soldiers of G.I. Joe. At the same time, there were rumors that he had left the project because the studio could not greenlight production. But the director's filmography is currently empty, which means he is interested in returning to direct another film. Let's also not forget that the producer of all Transformers films is Steven Spielberg, who tries to carefully select the production team. Furthermore, the third franchise film in development is a currently untitled project from director Josh Cooley. He was the one who directed the animated Transformers 1, which was very strong in terms of plot. This time, however, he will be entrusted with directing a live-action film with a significant budget. This is a definite risk for the studio because Cooley specializes in animated features and has an Oscar for Toy Story 4. However, it's worth noting that a recent example has emerged of an animation director creating a quality live-action film. This refers, of course, to the film How to Train Your Dragon, which was directed by the author of the original animated film, Dean DeBlois. Previously, he had no experience working with live actors, but he delivered a truly high-quality project, both in terms of its presentation and its technical aspects. It's likely that this example was the deciding factor in entrusting Cooley with a live-action film. In addition, Paramount has two more unknown projects in the Transformers universe in very early stages. Considering that all three of the aforementioned projects are films, the remaining two will most likely be animated features. This is supported by the production timeline because there isn't much time left until 2029 to shoot and release 5 films. But no matter how optimistic all this sounds, it doesn't mean we will see a whole host of different projects in the next few years. Paramount has likely realized that it would be a missed opportunity not to use the franchise rights before they expire. All 5 projects are in an early stage, which means the studio can scrap them at any moment without a significant financial loss. The management is evaluating its options, and when the time comes to choose, they will weigh all the pros and cons and settle on the most promising ones. If we were to make predictions, our choice would fall on Bay's film. He has not managed to achieve great success without Transformers. His Six Underground with Ryan Reynolds performed well on Netflix but was panned by critics. Ambulance with Jake Gyllenhaal received some of his best reviews but was a box office failure. At the same time, he understands what Transformers should be better than anyone, and he will surely give it his all in a final film. There have already been attempts to make the prequels a new beginning without his direct involvement. This was not met with great success. Then the franchise moved into animation, which also failed to remedy the situation. So the director's return to his post has become more possible than ever. Write your point of view in the comments on which project you think should be next. However, the franchise isn't just developing on the big screen. In the comics based on this universe, serious changes are also expected soon. The fact is, a new Transformers series has recently been announced, to be written by Robert Kirkman. And this is the widely known creator of The Walking Dead, which has long since gained immense popularity. And its television franchise continues to expand even today. His vision and approach will clearly change the familiar image of the characters. And considering how masterfully he adapted The Walking Dead, perhaps the Transformers might also appear in a series format. The first issue is expected as early as this October. Thus, it seems that Transformers has gotten a second wind and a new wave of interest. By the end of 2029, we will in any case see 1 or 2 new projects from the franchise, so we are eagerly awaiting official announcements. In the meantime, be sure to share your opinion in the comments about the news of Michael Bay's return, and whether the new Transformers can repeat the success of the first trilogy. That's all for now. We will keep an eye on further developments.